You're at a casino, and you just lost $100 on a bet. Now, someone offers you two choices. Choice A, get $50 back for sure. Choice B, flip a coin. Heads, you get your full $100 back. Tails, you get nothing. Which would you pick? You now understand that building wealth isn't about finding secret strategies, timing markets perfectly, or outsmarting professional investors. It's about consistently doing simple things that work while avoiding complicated things that don't. It's about letting time and compound growth do the heavy lifting while you focus on living your life. The beauty of this approach is that it works for everyone, regardless of income level, investment knowledge, or market timing ability. Whether you're just starting your career or approaching retirement, whether you earn $40,000 or $400,000 annually, the principles remain the same. Only the timeline and dollar amounts change. But knowing these principles isn't enough. The real magic happens when you stop thinking about wealth building and start actually building wealth. When you set up automatic investments into low-cost index funds. When you optimize your expenses to align with your values while maximizing your savings rate. When you ignore market volatility and financial media noise while staying focused on your long-term goals. This is your moment to choose a different path than the one most people follow. Instead of spending your entire working life earning money to fund an increasingly expensive lifestyle, you can spend a portion of your working life building assets that will fund your lifestyle forever. Instead of hoping that Social Security and employer retirement plans will provide adequate security, you can take control of your financial destiny. The journey won't always be easy or exciting. There will be market crashes that test your resolve, lifestyle temptations that challenge your discipline, and well-meaning advice that tries to complicate your simple strategy. But armed with the understanding you now have, you can navigate these challenges while staying true to the principles that create lasting wealth. Start today, even if you can only invest a small amount. Start with index funds, even if they seem boring compared to exciting individual stocks. Start with consistency, even if your initial progress seems slow. Every day you delay is a day that compound growth can't work for you. And every dollar you invest today is a dollar that will work for you for decades to come. The path to wealth is simple, but it's not easy. It requires discipline when others are undisciplined, patience when others are impatient, and confidence when others are fearful. But for those who stay the course, the rewards extend far beyond money. You gain freedom, options, security, and the peace of mind that comes from taking control of your financial future. Colin's journey from financial confusion to clarity offers a roadmap that anyone can follow. The destination isn't just wealth. It's the freedom to choose how you spend your time, the security to handle life's uncertainties, and the satisfaction that comes from achieving financial independence through your own disciplined efforts. Your wealth-building journey starts with your next financial decision. Make it count. Most people grab that guaranteed $50. Makes sense, right? But here's where it gets weird. Let's flip the situation. You're up $100 at the casino. Now your choices are: Choice A, lose $50 for sure. Choice B, flip a coin. Heads, you lose nothing. Tails, you lose the full $100. Suddenly, most people become gamblers. They take the risky coin flip. But wait, these are exactly the same scenarios. In both cases, you're choosing between a sure $50 or a 50-50 chance at $100. Yet people make completely opposite decisions. This isn't a flaw in your thinking. This is how every human brain works. And once you understand why, you'll never see decisions the same way again. Your mind isn't one thing making choices. It's like having two completely different people living in your head. One is fast, emotional, and jumps to conclusions. The other is slow, logical, but incredibly lazy. These two systems are constantly fighting for control of your decisions, and most of the time, you don't even know it's happening. The fast system sees a spider and makes you jump before you even think. It's the voice that screams danger when you're walking alone at night. It helps you catch a ball without calculating physics equations. But it's also the part that makes you buy things you don't need, trust people you shouldn't, and believe stories that aren't true. The slow system is your inner scientist. It's what you use to solve math problems, plan your retirement, or figure out the best route to work. It's logical and careful, but here's the problem. It's exhausting to use. So most of the time, it's taking a nap while the fast system runs your life. Think about the last time you were absolutely certain about something, only to find out you were completely wrong. Maybe you were sure you locked the door, but came home to find it open. Or you were positive someone said something they never actually said. That's the fast system, being confident about things it barely paid attention to. This isn't just about small mistakes. These two systems shape everything. Who you vote for, who you marry, what career you choose, how you spend your money. They determine whether you'll be successful or struggle, happy or miserable, make good decisions or terrible ones. But here's the incredible part. Once you understand how these systems work, you can actually use them to your advantage. You can catch your fast system when it's about to make a costly mistake. You can wake up your slow system when it matters most. You can make better decisions, avoid common traps, and maybe even become a little bit happier. The research behind this discovery changed everything we thought we knew about human behavior. It explained why smart people make dumb decisions, why we're terrible at predicting what will make us happy, and why the human brain, this amazing machine that put us on the moon, can be fooled by the simplest tricks. If you've ever wondered why you procrastinate, even when you know better, why you can't stick to a diet, why you worry about the wrong things, or why you keep making the same mistakes over and over again, you're about to find out. This isn't just another psychology lesson. This is the user manual for your own mind. Your ancestors lived in small groups where the things they could easily remember were actually good indicators of what was likely to happen to them. If tiger attacks were easy to remember, it's because tigers were actually a real threat in their environment. But now, your brain is trying to assess modern risks using Stone Age software, and it's getting confused. So how do you fight back against the availability trap? First, recognize when you're making judgments based on what comes to mind easily versus what's actually true. When you find yourself thinking, "This always happens," or "People like that are usually," pause and ask, "Am I thinking this because I have good data or because I have vivid examples?" Second, actively seek out the boring, normal examples that your brain ignores. If you're afraid of starting a business, don't just research dramatic failure stories. Find the boring success stories. The people who started small businesses and just made a decent living without any drama worth talking about. Third, be especially suspicious of your judgments when they're based on media consumption. The news, social media, movies, and books all have a bias toward dramatic, unusual events. They're not trying to give you an accurate picture of reality. They're trying to capture your attention. The availability trap isn't a flaw in your thinking. It's a useful mental shortcut that usually works pretty well. But in our modern world, where information travels faster than our brains can process it, this shortcut can lead you seriously astray. Understanding it is the first step to making better decisions about the real risks and opportunities in your life. I'm about to ask you a question, but first, write down the last 2 digits of your phone number. Got it? Good. Now, here's the question. How many countries are there in Africa? Before you answer, let me guess something about your response. If the last 2 digits of your phone number were high, like 87 or 92, you probably thought of a higher number of African countries. If those digits were low, like 23 or 14, your guess was probably lower too. That sounds crazy, right? What could your phone number possibly have to do with African geography? But this exact experiment has been done thousands of times, and the results are always the same. Random numbers influence our estimates, even when we know they're completely unrelated to what we're judging. Welcome to the anchor effect, one of the most powerful and sneaky ways your brain gets hijacked. Here's how it works. Whenever your brain needs to make a judgment or estimate, it looks for a starting point, an anchor. Then it adjusts from that anchor to reach its final answer. Sounds reasonable, except for one problem. Your brain is terrible at adjusting far enough from the anchor. Whatever number or idea gets there first has a huge influence on your final decision. This isn't just about random numbers. Anchors are controlling your life in ways you've never noticed. Think about salary negotiations. The first number mentioned, whether it's in the job posting, or what you ask for, or what they offer, becomes an anchor that shapes the entire negotiation. If a job is posted as $50,000 to $70,000, both you and the employer start thinking in that range, even if the job might be worth more or less. Smart negotiators know this. They throw out the first number, and they make it extreme. If you're selling your car, and the first person who looks at it offers $3,000, that becomes an anchor. Even if you reject it, you'll probably end up accepting something closer to $3,000 than you would have if they'd opened with $5,000. Real estate agents are masters of anchoring. They don't just show you houses randomly. They carefully control which house you see first because they know it becomes your reference point for everything else. Show you an overpriced house first, and suddenly, the reasonably priced houses look like great deals. Show you a tiny apartment first, and the medium-sized places feel spacious. But anchoring goes way beyond money. It shapes how you judge people, experiences, and even your own life. Meet Jennifer, who just started a new job. On her first day, her boss mentioned that the previous person in her role was really struggling with the workload and making lots of mistakes. Now Jennifer has an anchor. The previous person was bad at this job. This makes Jennifer look good by comparison, even when she makes normal new employee mistakes. If the boss had instead said the previous person was incredibly talented but got promoted, Jennifer would be judged against a completely different standard. The scariest part about anchors is that they work even when you know they are irrelevant. Remember that phone number experiment? It works even when researchers tell people explicitly that the random number has nothing to do with African countries. Your rational slow mind knows the anchor is meaningless, but your quick mind still uses it as a starting point. This shows up everywhere in daily life. When you're choosing a restaurant and you see one with $50 entrees next to one with $15 entrees, the $15 place seems cheap even if it's actually overpriced for what you get. The expensive restaurant created an anchor that makes everything else look reasonable by comparison. Dating apps exploit this too. They show you really attractive people first to set a high anchor, making you think the app has lots of amazing options. Then when you see more normal-looking people, you judge them against that impossible standard instead of thinking about whether they might actually be a good match for you. Your own past experiences become anchors for your future expectations. If your first job paid terribly, a mediocre salary at your second job feels amazing. If you grew up in a small town, a medium-sized city feels huge. If your first relationship was dramatic and chaotic, a stable relationship might actually feel boring because your anchor for love is high drama. This creates some weird effects in how you experience life. People who had terrible childhoods sometimes appreciate simple pleasures more than people who had great childhoods because their anchor for good is set much lower. People who make their first million often feel less excited than they expected because they've been anchored to stories of billionaires. The anchoring effect explains why upselling works so well. When you're at a coffee shop and you see a $7 specialty drink, the $4 regular coffee seems reasonable. The expensive drink isn't there to be sold. It's there to make the regular prices feel normal. Car dealerships do this with loaded expensive models that make the base model seem like a practical choice. But here's how you can use anchoring to your advantage. In negotiations, always make the first offer and make it extreme, but not so extreme that you lose credibility. If you're asking for a raise, don't start with what you think is fair. Start higher. Knowing that number becomes the anchor for the entire conversation. When you're making big purchases, research the highest prices first to reset your anchor upward. If you're buying a house, look at some expensive houses first so your budget doesn't feel constraining. Just don't let those expensive houses become your new standard for what you need. Be aware of anchors when you're making important judgments about people. That first impression, that first piece of information you learn about someone, is going to color everything else you notice about them. Try to gather multiple data points before making big decisions, and pay attention to the anchors in your own life. What standards are you using to judge your success, your relationships, your happiness? Are those anchors helping you appreciate what you have? Or are they making you constantly dissatisfied? The anchor effect isn't going anywhere. It's too deeply wired into how your brain works. But once you know it's there, you can start to notice when you're being anchored and ask yourself, is the starting point actually relevant to what I'm deciding? Most of the time, it's not. Let me ask you something that might sound a little strange. Would you rather find $20 on the street or avoid losing $20 from your wallet? Logically, these are identical situations. Both leave you $20 better off than you would have been otherwise. But I bet the thought of losing $20 feels much worse than the thought of finding $20 feels good. If you're like most people, losing $20 would bother you about twice as much as finding $20 would make you happy. This isn't a character flaw or a sign that you're negative. This is one of the most fundamental features of human psychology. Losses feel much more powerful than equivalent gains. We call this loss aversion, and it's quietly controlling more of your life than you realize. Think about your stuff. Right now, you probably own things that you'd never buy if you didn't already have them. That expensive jacket hanging in your closet that you never wear. If it was stolen and you had to replace it, you might choose something much cheaper. But because you already own it, getting rid of it feels like losing something valuable. This is why people hold on to stocks that are losing money way longer than they should. Selling means accepting the loss, making it real and final. As long as they don't sell, they can tell themselves the loss is just temporary. They'd rather hold on to a bad investment for years than accept a small loss and move their money somewhere better. Loss aversion explains why you have that drawer full of random cables and chargers you'll never use. Throwing them away feels like losing something that might be valuable someday. The tiny possibility of future need feels more important than the definite benefit of having a cleaner space right now. But loss aversion goes way deeper than just stuff. It shapes how you think about change, risk, and opportunity in every area of life. Consider your job. Maybe you're not thrilled with it, but it's familiar and comfortable. You know the people, you know the routine, you know what to expect. A new job might offer better pay, more interesting work, or better opportunities for growth. But taking it means losing the comfort and security of what you already have. Your brain focuses intensely on what you'd be giving up. The relationships with current co-workers, the short commute, the knowledge of how everything works, the accumulation of seniority and reputation. The potential gains from a new job feel uncertain and abstract compared to the concrete losses you can easily imagine. So you stay put, not because your current job is great, but because leaving feels like losing too much. This is how loss aversion keeps people stuck in situations that aren't serving them well. The same thing happens in relationships. Even relationships that aren't particularly happy become hard to leave because of loss aversion. You're not just considering whether a different relationship might be better. You're focused on losing the history you've built together, the shared friends, the comfortable routines, the investment of time and emotion you've already made. People stay in mediocre relationships for years, not because they're particularly fulfilling, but because ending them feels like losing something valuable. The known problems of your current relationship feel less scary than the unknown challenges of starting over. Loss aversion makes you conservative in exactly the wrong ways. It makes you hold on to things that aren't working while being afraid to try things that might work better. It makes you overvalue what you already have and undervalue what you might gain. But here's where it gets really interesting. Loss aversion isn't just about big life decisions. It affects tiny choices throughout your day, often in ways that add up to big consequences over time. Take subscription services. You probably have at least one subscription you never use but haven't cancelled. Maybe it's a streaming service you signed up for one show, or a gym membership you never use, or a software subscription you forgot about. Keeping these subscriptions feels like maintaining access to something valuable. Canceling feels like losing that access, even though you're not actually using it. Companies know this and design their services around it. They make signing up easy and canceling complicated. They offer annual plans that lock you in, so canceling feels like losing money you already paid. They send emails about all the content you'll lose access to if you cancel, making the cancellation feel like a loss instead of a rational decision to stop paying for something you don't use. Loss aversion also explains why people are so bad at decluttering. Each item you consider getting rid of feels like a potential loss. That book you might read someday, Those clothes that might come back in style. That kitchen gadget you used once and might use again. The abstract benefit of having less stuff feels tiny compared to the concrete feeling of losing each individual item. But understanding loss aversion can actually help you make better decisions once you know how to work with it instead of against it. First, when you're facing a big decision, try to reframe it in terms of gains instead of losses. Instead of thinking about what you'd lose by changing jobs, focus on what you'd gain. Instead of thinking about the money you'd lose by canceling unused subscriptions, think about the money you'd gain to spend on things you actually value. Second, use loss aversion to your advantage by making commitments that create artificial losses. If you want to exercise more, pay for a personal trainer in advance. Now, skipping workouts feels like losing money you already spent. If you want to save money, set up automatic transfers to savings, so not saving feels like losing money instead of just not gaining it. Third, recognize that your attachment to things you already have is partly irrational. When you're deciding whether to keep something, ask yourself, if I didn't already own this, would I choose to acquire it today? If the answer is no, you're probably holding on to it because of loss aversion, not because it's actually valuable to you. The most successful people aren't the ones who never experienced loss aversion. It's too fundamental to human nature to eliminate completely. They're the ones who recognize when loss aversion is making them too conservative and consciously push themselves to focus on potential gains instead of certain losses. Loss aversion evolved to keep your ancestors alive in a world where losing resources could mean death. But in modern life, the things you're afraid to lose usually aren't life or death important. They're just familiar and comfortable. And sometimes, holding on to what's familiar prevents you from discovering something much better. Quick question. Think of the last big project you completed. Maybe renovating a room, planning a wedding, writing a report, or learning a new skill. How long did you think it would take when you started? And how long did it actually take? If you're like virtually every human who's ever lived, it took way longer than you expected. Welcome to the planning fallacy. one of the most consistent and costly mistakes your brain makes. Here's what's weird about this. You're not just bad at estimating your own projects. You're surprisingly good at estimating how long similar projects will take other people. If a friend asks how long their kitchen renovation will take, you'll probably give them a realistic timeline that accounts for delays, complications, and unexpected problems. But when it's your kitchen, your brain becomes ridiculously optimistic. This isn't because you're arrogant or delusional. It's because when you're planning your own projects, your brain uses a completely different mental process than when you're thinking about other people's projects. When you think about someone else's renovation, your mind automatically calls up examples. My neighbor's kitchen took 6 months and went over budget. I saw a TV show where everything went wrong. These projects always have surprises. You're thinking about the outside view, what typically happens with projects like this. But when it's your project, your brain switches to the inside view. Instead of thinking about what usually happens, you imagine your specific plan step by step. You picture everything going smoothly. You assume you'll work efficiently, that materials will arrive on time, that you won't encounter any problems you haven't already thought of. Your brain constructs what feels like a detailed, realistic plan. But it's actually a fantasy where everything goes according to schedule and nothing unexpected happens. Let me tell you about David, who decided to learn guitar. He figured he'd practice for 30 minutes every day, work through an online course, and be playing his favorite songs within 3 months. He had it all mapped out. Week 1 to 2, basic chords. Week 3 to 4, chord transitions. Week 5 to 8, simple songs. Week 9 to 12, his favorite songs. David's plan wasn't crazy. Each step seemed reasonable. But he didn't account for the days when he'd be too tired to practice, or when work got busy, or when his fingers hurt too much to continue, or when certain techniques took way longer to master than expected. He was planning for the ideal version of learning guitar, not the messy reality. 6 months later, David could play a few songs, but nowhere near what he'd imagined after 3 months. He wasn't lazy or incapable. He just fell victim to the planning fallacy, like everyone else. This happens because your brain has a blind spot when it comes to your own future behavior. You plan based on your current motivation and energy levels, assuming you'll maintain that same enthusiasm throughout the entire project. You don't account for the inevitable days when you'll be sick, distracted, unmotivated, or dealing with other priorities. The planning fallacy gets worse when the stakes are higher. The more important a project is to you, the more optimistic your timeline becomes. You really want to finish that business plan, lose that weight, or complete that degree. So your brain creates timelines that match your desires rather than reality. This creates a vicious cycle. When projects take longer than expected, you don't learn the right lesson. Instead of thinking, I should plan for more time next time, you think, this particular project had unusual complications, or I wasn't disciplined enough. So you make the same overly optimistic plans for the next project. Companies fall into this trap constantly. Software projects are notoriously late, construction runs over schedule, and product launches get delayed. Everyone involved is smart and experienced, but they're all planning based on the inside view, imagining their specific project going smoothly, rather than learning from the outside view of how similar projects typically go. The planning fallacy doesn't just waste time, it creates stress, disappointment, and poor decisions. When you consistently underestimate how long things take, you overcommit yourself. You say yes to too many things because each one seems manageable on its own. Then you find yourself overwhelmed, rushing through important tasks or letting people down. But here's how you can beat the planning fallacy. First, use the outside view for your own projects. Before making any timeline, ask yourself, how long do projects like this typically take? Look up examples. Ask people who've done similar things. Research average timelines. Treat your project like it's happening to someone else. Second, add buffer time to every estimate. Whatever timeline feels realistic, add 25 to 50% more time. This isn't pessimism, it's realism. Things go wrong, motivation fluctuates, and life gets in the way. The buffer time accounts for the normal friction of real life. Third, break big projects into smaller pieces and estimate each piece separately. It's easier to estimate accurately when you're thinking about smaller, more concrete tasks. Plus, if one piece takes longer than expected, you can adjust the rest of your timeline accordingly. Fourth, plan for your worst days, not your best days. Don't assume you'll work at peak efficiency throughout the entire project. Plan for the days when you're tired, distracted, or dealing with other priorities. If you finish faster than expected, that's a nice bonus. Finally, keep track of how long things actually take versus your estimates. Most people never do this, so they never learn from their mistakes. Start noting your predictions and results. You'll quickly see patterns in where your estimates go wrong. The planning fallacy isn't just about being late. It's about understanding the difference between the story your brain tells you about the future and what the future actually looks like. Your brain wants to believe that this time will be different, that this project will go smoothly, that you'll be more disciplined and efficient than usual. But the outside view tells a different story. It says that projects typically take longer than expected, that people usually face unexpected obstacles, and that motivation naturally fluctuates over time. This isn't negativity. It's wisdom gained from observing thousands of projects and plans. The most successful people aren't the ones who never experienced the planning fallacy. They're the ones who planned for it, building realistic timelines that account for the messy reality of getting things done. Here's a fun fact that's going to make you uncomfortable. You're probably overconfident about almost everything. Don't take it personally. So is literally everyone else. Studies show that 90% of drivers think they're above average at driving. Most people think they're better looking than average, funnier than average, and smarter than average. Obviously, this is mathematically impossible. Half of all people have to be below average at everything, by definition. But overconfidence goes way deeper than just thinking you're above average. It affects how certain you are about facts, predictions, and judgments. And this kind of overconfidence can be incredibly costly. Let me give you a test. I'm going to ask you some questions, and for each one, I want you to give me a range where you're 90% confident the real answer falls. So if I ask for the population of Australia, and you think it's around 25 million, you might say, I'm 90% confident it's between 15 million and 35 million. You should only be wrong about 1 time out of 10. Here we go. What year was Mozart born? How many miles is it from New York to Los Angeles? What's the diameter of the moon in miles? How many countries are there in the United Nations? Now here's the uncomfortable truth. If you're like most people, your ranges were way too narrow. You were probably wrong on 3 or 4 out of those 4 questions, not just one. This happens consistently across thousands of studies and millions of people. We're terrible at knowing how much we don't know. This is called the overconfidence effect, and it's one of the most dangerous biases your brain has. It makes you take risks you shouldn't take, make decisions with insufficient information, and trust your judgments more than you should. Think about your career. When you decided on your current job or field of study, how confident were you that it would work out? Most people are very confident about these big life decisions, but careers are incredibly unpredictable. Industries change, companies fail, personal interests evolve, and the job market shifts in unexpected ways. This doesn't mean you should be paralyzed by uncertainty, but overconfidence makes you less likely to have backup plans, less likely to keep developing new skills, and less likely to recognize early warning signs that a change might be needed. Overconfidence shows up constantly in financial decisions. People day trade stocks thinking they can beat professional investors. They pick individual stocks instead of diversifying. They time the market trying to buy low and sell high. They start businesses without researching the market or having enough savings to survive the inevitable rough patches. The scary part is that overconfidence feels like competence. When you're overconfident, you don't feel reckless. You feel informed and decisive. Your brain gives you the same feeling of certainty, whether your confidence is justified or completely unfounded. Here's why this happens. Your brain has access to all the information that supports your current belief, but it's much harder to access information that contradicts it. When you think about whether you're a good driver, your mind easily recalls times when you've driven successfully and safely. It doesn't automatically remind you of times when you were distracted, made mistakes, or just got lucky. This creates an illusion of knowledge. You feel like you have lots of evidence for your beliefs because you do. You just don't have access to the evidence against them. Overconfidence gets worse when you have some real expertise. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing because it makes you feel like you understand more than you actually do. Someone who's read a few investing books feels confident picking stocks. Someone who's successfully renovated one room thinks they can handle a whole house. Real experts are actually less overconfident than beginners, but for a counterintuitive reason. The more you know about something, the more you realize how much you don't know. Beginners don't know what they don't know, so they feel confident. Experts know exactly what they don't know, so they're more cautious. But even experts fall victim to overconfidence outside their area of expertise. A brilliant surgeon might be overconfident about their investing abilities. A successful business owner might be overconfident about their parenting skills. Your brain doesn't carefully track which areas you're actually competent in. It just gives you a general feeling of being capable and smart. Overconfidence is especially dangerous when it comes to predictions about the future. People are consistently overconfident about how long projects will take, how much money they'll make, how their relationships will work out, and what their lives will look like in 5 years. The future is inherently uncertain, but your brain doesn't like uncertainty. So it creates stories about the future that feel detailed and realistic, then treats those stories as predictions rather than just possibilities. You become confident about outcomes that are actually quite unpredictable. This is why so many people don't save enough for retirement. They're overconfident that their income will keep growing, that they'll stay healthy, that the industry will remain stable, and that they'll have plenty of time to catch up on savings later. Each individual assumption might be reasonable, but the combination of all of them working out perfectly is much less likely than it feels. So how do you fight overconfidence without becoming paralyzed by doubt? First, actively look for information that contradicts your beliefs and decisions. When you're confident about something, ask yourself, what evidence would change my mind? Then go looking for that evidence. If you can't find any, you might be in an echo chamber. Second, use the outside view for your own situation. Instead of thinking about your specific circumstances, think about what typically happens to people in similar situations. If you're starting a business, don't just focus on your great idea and strong motivation. Look at statistics about how many new businesses succeed. Third, make explicit predictions and keep track of your accuracy. Write down what you think will happen and when. Then check back later to see how you did. Most people never do this, so they never get feedback on their overconfidence. Fourth, seek out people who disagree with you and actually listen to them. Surround yourself with people who will challenge your assumptions and point out flaws in your reasoning. This is uncomfortable, but it's one of the best ways to calibrate your confidence levels. Finally, remember that being less confident doesn't mean being less successful. It means being more realistic about risks, more likely to have backup plans, and more likely to make decisions based on evidence rather than wishful thinking. Overconfidence isn't always bad. It can give you the courage to take necessary risks and try new things. But uncalibrated overconfidence, where your feeling of certainty doesn't match the actual predictability of the situation, leads to poor decisions and unnecessary failures. The goal isn't to eliminate confidence. It's to make your confidence match reality as closely as possible. Let me tell you about Sarah's promotion. She'd been working toward this moment for 3 years. Longer hours, extra projects, networking events, everything. When she finally got promoted to manager with a $15,000 raise, she was thrilled. She celebrated with friends, bought some new clothes, upgraded her apartment. Life was perfect. 6 months later, Sarah felt exactly the same as she had before the promotion. The extra money was nice, but she'd gotten used to it. The new title was prestigious, but it had become normal. The work was more interesting, but also more stressful. She found herself working toward the next promotion, convinced that would finally make her truly happy. Sarah just discovered one of the most surprising findings about human psychology. We're terrible at predicting what will make us happy and how long that happiness will last. Your brain has a built-in system that's constantly trying to predict how different choices and experiences will affect your happiness. This system is crucial for making good decisions. You need to be able to imagine how different futures will feel. But this system has some serious bugs that cause you to make choices that don't actually improve your life. The first bug is called impact bias. You consistently overestimate how much future events will affect your happiness and how long those effects will last. You think getting that promotion, buying that car, or moving to that city will make a bigger difference in your life than it actually will. This happens because when you imagine the future, you focus intensely on the thing that's changing while ignoring everything else that will stay the same. When Sarah was imagining her promotion, she pictured herself feeling proud and successful. She didn't picture the boring Tuesday meetings, the difficult employee conversations, or the fact that she'd still have the same commute, the same apartment, and the same relationship issues. Your brain zooms in on the promotion and forgets that most of your life, your daily routines, your personality, your relationships, your health, will remain exactly the same. So you expect the promotion to have a much bigger impact on your overall happiness than it actually can. The second bug is called hedonic adaptation. This is your brain's tendency to return to a baseline level of happiness even after positive or negative events. You adapt to new circumstances surprisingly quickly, and things that seemed incredibly important start feeling normal. Think about the last time you got something you really wanted. Maybe a new phone, a new car, or a new home. How amazing did it feel on the first day? How about after a week, a month, a year? The excitement fades as the new thing becomes part of your normal life. This isn't just about material possessions. It happens with life changes too. People who move to beautiful cities expect the gorgeous scenery to keep making them happy. But after a few months, they barely notice it. People who get married expect the joy of partnership to be constant, but it settles into a comfortable routine. Hedonic adaptation served an important purpose for your ancestors. If good things made you permanently happier, you might become complacent and stop seeking out the resources you needed to survive. If bad things made you permanently miserable, you might give up trying to improve your situation. So, your brain evolved to return to baseline relatively quickly, keeping you motivated to keep working for better circumstances. But in modern life, hedonic adaptation can trap you in a cycle where you keep chasing the next thing that will finally make you happy, not realizing that you'll adapt to that too. This is why lottery winners aren't significantly happier than other people after the initial excitement wears off. It's why people in beautiful, expensive cities aren't happier than people in ordinary, affordable ones. It's why people who achieve major life goals often feel empty afterward instead of fulfilled. The third bug is called focusing illusion. When you think about any single factor in your life, you automatically exaggerate its importance to your overall happiness. If I ask you how much your salary affects your happiness, you'll overestimate its importance because thinking about salary makes it seem central to your well-being. This is why people consistently overestimate how much money affects happiness. When you're thinking about money, it feels incredibly important. But studies show that beyond having enough to meet basic needs, additional income has a surprisingly small effect on day-to-day happiness. People think they'd be much happier if they made $100,000 instead of $60,000. But they're wrong. They would be a little happier, but not nearly as much as they expect. Meanwhile, they might sacrifice things that actually do contribute to happiness, like time with family, interesting work, or good health, in pursuit of the money that won't help as much as they. So what does actually contribute to lasting happiness? Research shows a few things consistently matter. Relationships are the biggest factor. People with strong social connections are significantly happier than people without them. And this effect doesn't fade over time. Unlike getting used to a new car, you don't get used to having people who care about you. Meaningful work and activities matter more than prestigious or high-paying ones. People who feel like their work contributes something valuable to the world are happier than people who just make a lot of money. This is why teachers and social workers often report higher job satisfaction than investment bankers. Experiences tend to contribute more to happiness than possessions. You adapt to owning things, but memories of experiences become part of your identity in a way that possessions don't. A vacation becomes a story you tell and remember fondly. A new couch just becomes furniture. Regular small pleasures often beat rare big ones. Having coffee with a friend once a week might contribute more to your happiness than one amazing vacation per year. Your brain adapts to big positive events, but it doesn't adapt to small, varied pleasures that happen regularly. physical health, and exercise have enormous effects on mood and energy that people consistently underestimate. When you're imagining your future happiness, you probably don't think much about how you'll feel physically, but how you feel physically affects almost everything else. Having a sense of progress and growth matters more than achieving specific outcomes. People are happier when they feel like they're getting better at something or moving toward meaningful goals, even if they haven't reached those goals yet. This research suggests a completely different approach to pursuing happiness. Instead of chasing the big things you think will transform your life, focus on building the small, sustainable habits and relationships that research shows actually matter. Instead of working extra hours to afford a bigger house, maybe those hours would be better spent with friends or family. Instead of moving to an expensive city because you think it will make you happier, maybe you'd be better off building a stronger community where you already are. This doesn't mean you should never pursue goals or want better things for yourself, but it means being realistic about how much those things will actually improve your life, and making sure you're not sacrificing the things that research shows really do matter. The happiness trap isn't that wanting to be happy is wrong. It's that your brain's predictions about what will make you happy are systematically biased in ways that can lead you to make choices that don't actually improve your life. Understanding these biases doesn't eliminate them. Hedonic adaptation and impact bias are too fundamental to how your brain works. But it can help you make better decisions about where to focus your time and energy in pursuit of a genuinely satisfying life. Remember Sarah at the casino, choosing between a guaranteed $50 and a risky coin flip. That moment revealed everything about how your mind really works. You now understand the secret. You don't have one brain making decisions. You have two systems, one fast and emotional, one slow and logical, constantly competing for control. The fast system jumps to conclusions, gets fooled by available memories, and anchors on irrelevant information. The slow system can think carefully and logically, but it's lazy and often asleep